of Highland Park, Illinois, October 15th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Bruckman. Present. Councilmember Ross. Present. Councilmember Tapia. Councilmember Littleworth. Here. Councilmember Stone. Here. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Here.
Mayor Rotary.
Here, we have quorum. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole held September 23rd, 2024?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those minutes are approved. We have one item on tonight's agenda, a Central Avenue Bridge presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So the item on the agenda this evening pertains to the Central Avenue Bridge reconstruction. This project, as the council certainly knows, was a multi-year process. It began in approximately 2015, concluded in 2022, based on feedback that we heard from several council members. There was an interest to put it back on the Committee of the Whole agenda to take a look at the consideration of an aesthetic liner to place on the inside of the bridge or the street side of the bridge. So with us this evening, we have Manny Gomez, who is our city engineer. We also have Dwayne O'Loughlin. He's the Chief Operating Officer with Siorba Group. They served as our contractor overseeing this project. And then certainly want to recognize Ron Bannon, our Director of Public Works. So Public Works was the key department that took a lead on this project, working very closely, certainly with our office, the City Manager's Office, Community Development, as well as other staff. There was a significant amount of public engagement as part of this process. And the staff report details the process that we went through, which includes public engagement, review by Historic Preservation Commission, and then ultimately City Council consideration for the ultimate approval of the project. So certainly understanding that sometimes when projects are done, we take a look at them and then we say, hey, why don't we just kind of revisit certain elements of it? So we are bringing it to you for consideration this evening to see if there is an interest in adding an additional element to that bridge to add to the aesthetic appeal. And if there is support for that, then we can kind of talk through the next steps. But we want to make sure the staff report details kind of the comprehensive process that this project went through. We're going to go through some of that on this PowerPoint presentation, and then certainly looking for your policy feedback thereafter. Can you just hit enter? Okay, yeah.
Gita, thank you. Mayor, Council, thank you for having me here. Okay, I'll start my presentation if it's okay with everybody. We are looking at the Central Avenue Bridge project. That project was started many years ago. I believe like 2016 is when we got the funding for it, and it went through a lot of IDOT and federal process to get to where it is now, which is end of construction. For the agenda, I want to go over the grant funding, the federal process, a historic item with the bridge, the Historic Preservation Commission form liner discussion, additional aesthetic treatments that may be considered by the council, and the tree impacts that the project had to existing trees. Next slide, please. Okay, grant funding. I said 2016, actually 2015. Sorry about that. My mind is going. Anyway, 2015, city receives federal grant funds. And we received, the total project cost was like $4.45 million. We received $3.56 million in federal grant funding, and our local share was $955,000. Next slide, please. In the federal process, we have 3 phases that we're required to go through, and this is a requirement when you use federal money. Phase 1, the preliminary engineering. Phase 2, the final design, which is where you do the plans and bid documents. Of course, Phase 3 is the construction portion where the project is built. As part of the Phase 1, they look at certain things in preliminary engineering. Impacts, environmental concerns, and other things such as historic issues. In this case, IDOT found the bridge to have some historic characteristics, and they thought that it should be examined as part of this process to make sure, and they do this to protect key historic elements in certain things. You would never want to destroy something that has a lot of historic significance, at least without a due process of reviewing it and making sure it's okay. So that led to this, what's called the Section 106 4F. That's state IDOT lingo. I won't get into all that boring stuff, but next slide, please. So that led to this report, the Section 106, Section 4F report, which documents what they call adverse effects. In other words, what effects does removing and replacing this bridge have on key items like historic things? Anyway, as part of that process, the state said, okay, we should bring this to our Historic Preservation Commission and have it at a public meeting to make sure that it's vetted here publicly. They want to make sure that the locals have a say in, do they think there's historic significance? And if so, what are those, and how will that affect the project moving forward? Next slide, please. So we went to HPC. At that time, we were showing some recommendations for aesthetic treatments of the bridge. One of them was the ugly IDOT bridge, which nobody likes, but we had to show that because that's our basis, our starting point. Then we showed another item. It really wasn't what you see here. And that's where we received feedback at this meeting and said, wait a minute, what you're showing doesn't mimic or look like the existing bridge, and we want you to do that, to retain the historic characteristics of this bridge. We want the arch, we want it to look as close as possible to the existing bridge. And part of that discussion was the aesthetic treatments. Like, what are we going to do to this? Is it going to look different? What is it going to look like? Anyway, one of the things that came out of there was a form liner, which is the shape or pattern that you see on the arch there. It's not flat concrete, right? It's not smooth. There's a certain design, certain texture to it. And that was one of the things that was discussed. Next slide, please. So there's the existing bridge. Of course, it was smooth on the inside. There was some work already done. That ugly concrete portion there was something that was done because parts of the structure were already starting to need work and support. There's the historic-looking arch portion that we try to mimic with the new bridge. Next slide, please. And there's the existing bridge. I'm sorry, not the existing.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sorry. There's the existing bridge, and you can see that it was, no, that's not the existing bridge.
It's the current bridge.
That's the current bridge. Yeah.
The
So I'm
current
sorry.
bridge, yeah.
I was thinking, why does that look funny? Anyway, that's the current bridge. You can see it's a 2-lane bridge. You can see the form liner that was put on the outside of the parapet, and you can see the inside smooth. There is no texture to the inside, but again, that was vetted through the public process. I mean, it would be nice to have something on the inside, but we were trying to mimic the existing bridge, the historic elements of the bridge. Next slide, please. So additional aesthetic treatments to be considered, by council, I guess, are, do you want to add a form liner to the parapets, that concrete vertical wall that prevents people and vehicles from falling off the bridge into the ravine? Do you want to add something there? Do you want to paint the metal? Right now it's currently silver, guardrail silver. If you want to paint it, what do you want? Black, brown, something else? Landscaping. Somebody had recommended putting ivy on it. We don't think that's a good idea for inspection purposes. It's hard to
'cause then you
inspect, hard to
can't see.
repair.
Yeah.
It's not Wrigley Field, okay, guys? This is not Wrigley Field. So
Right.
okay, but anyway, you can consider planter boxes, other treatments that you guys may come up with tonight. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen here. The IDOT project is complete. The construction's complete. At this point, any additional treatments would be at 100% city cost. We have an estimate for adding the form liner, that treatment to the inside of the parapet at about $60,000 and painting about $10,000 to paint the metal. Next slide, please.
The painting is for the metal or for the bridge?
Just the metal. We didn't think
Okay.
that you would want to paint the concrete of the bridge.
Right, okay.
If you do, please let us know.
It's the chain link when you're coming westbound.
You can see it in the photograph if you go back.
photograph, I'm sorry, I'm not visual.
Can you go back?
See it just to the
Oh,
left?
chain link.
It kind of goes along so one side goes into the property and then the other side goes into the park.
You see the silver and
Silver on the left, and then, yeah. Do we paint any, other bridges are all silver. I don't remember any, are they painted black or brown? or
we painted the Clavey Road Bridge, Mayor.
Black, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That matches those railings. that are
Right,
going
right,
down.
right, right.
But
Okay.
this matches the line.
Yeah.
It looks better. I think that the black and brown really stand
Can
out.
There'd be a lot of contrast.
Say something because I checked with Corporation Council and
Sure, go ahead.
who suggested that I state this at the beginning.
You bet.
That in the interest of, transparency in government, I want to share that yesterday I called Corporation Counsel Steve Elrod to ask for his advice because I live a couple houses away from this bridge, and I do not want anyone to think self-interest is involved in this agenda item. He assures me that I can safely participate in this conversation, and I want to state that the bridge was completed well before I ran and won a seat on city council. As the city manager, mayor, and 4 colleagues on council know, as a private resident, I had concerns about the scale of this project before construction started, and during construction, I had concerns about communication to neighbors, so I contacted many of you of this table. However, construction was fully completed back in fall of, I think, 2022, and the scale of the project was set in stone, or rather concrete. I was more concerned about learning from mistakes and history for the sake of other infrastructure and construction projects. Therefore, the bridge itself, and too many puns here, but was mostly water under the bridge for me. You couldn't change the scale of the bridge any longer. I am still concerned about restoring the trees and landscape removed during the construction, but I say all of this because I was not the one who pushed for a discussion of improving the appearance of the completed bridge. Councilmember Tapia is concerned about the appearance of the bridge and initiated it and moved it forward as an agenda item and can affirm that fact. He asked if I would support having it as an agenda item, and I said yes. But I wanted to be very clear about my relationship to the project before I said anything. Yeah.
Appreciate that, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Hey Manny, if we
Yes.
put letterboxes on, would that obstruct the walkway that's on
It
there?
depends how, where you put them and what they look like, the width and so on, Mayor.
Okay,
Again,
so if they were hanging on the exterior and then just.
Yes,
Yeah,
or
okay.
above, for example, you know.
So that's how you could
I
get
would
your
not
idea of
recommend
that.
narrowing the sidewalk, yes.
Because it's a narrow
You were just speaking about the metal
Right.
portion of the fence.
Right, you don't
And I
want us to
think-
forget that.
Yes, because I don't quite understand why it's higher than the concrete portion of the bridge. I mean, if the concrete has to be a certain height, why wouldn't the metal have to be a certain height? It looks, I will say, out of place when you're actually there,
Uh-huh.
that the metal's too high.
Yeah, okay. Manny, any insight?
You know, that metal there meets the, you know, guidelines and requirements for construction of a new bridge. It happens to be slightly higher, Mayor.
Uh-huh.
But we were following, you know, the guidelines, and we didn't think that, you know, it was twice as high or something like that. Okay, maybe it looks funny, but being just a little bit higher, you can see that it has that little, like, step or whatever at the top of it.
Right,
I mean, we didn't see that as, like, completely, you know, out of place, at least in our opinion. I mean, everybody has a different opinion, right, Mayor?
I'm just gonna say from designers' opinions on who live in the neighborhood, other architects, it looks, you know, odd. Why have it, that may be the design standard, but you didn't make the rest of the bridge, the majority of the bridge is a different height. And it, you know, if it's a safety issue, then why didn't the rest of the, you know, parapet wall, why didn't meet that height? It doesn't make sense.
is that relevant though to the?
Aesthetics?
No,
Oh.
to the safety of that residence that now has that area leading straight into the ravine. I'm just looking again at the pictures, you know, the park side, it seems like that's not necessarily the case, that the fence is a little bit lower, and I'm just wondering if the residents, and that's plural,
We have 2 more slides, and the last one
Has-
has pictures.
I'm looking at the pictures from the packet. I'm absolutely
yeah.
looking at that. And so that's, because I went
Yeah.
over there again today, I've been by there several times. You know, I recognize there's a difference between a pedestrian bridge and then maybe the standards, Ron's nodding his head.
You're correct, Mayor. There was different requirements for the bridge itself, and then there's also the pedestrian areas where they're walking, and I believe, I mean, we have Sue over here as well, but the one that's parallel going up that driveway was because it didn't have to meet the same standard as the bridge, as far as being a pedestrian, or if a car is going there, the direction of the car is more like a glancing pole. So that doesn't answer the question of why it's not as, or why it's taller.
I just wondered if the private residents had been involved in that conversation, if that's perhaps why. No?
As far as you're saying about.
Why that is a little bit higher over there. I mean, here's the bottom line. This is a project that has already been let, bid, performed, done. And I appreciate the wanting to gain insights and learn lessons for future bridge projects. I guess my question at this point is, are there things we can mitigate, but not at a high cost, that would at least address some of the aesthetic concerns, and not be a huge $60,000 for, there are other projects obviously in our capital improvement plan that we're looking to fund. And so obviously, we appreciate that the state was willing to foot the vast majority of this bill, but that did come with its own aesthetic costs and frustrations for the neighbors in terms of a one-lane bridge turning into a two-lane bridge. But now here we are. And so is it a matter of spraying moss on it? I mean, I'm looking at the old bridge. The old bridge, frankly, was not that great to look at either. So, what is it aesthetically that we could do to maybe diminish some of the impact versus just waiting for another 50 years for this to kind of become more part of the environment? And I know trees also were part of it, and I guess that's a question that needs to be answered, one or the other of you, in terms of the trees that were taken out and
We've got 2 more slides on trees and
We do
on the topic.
Gotcha, all right, so I just,
The packet also shows the quality of the concrete work. I think that's one of the things that people are really reacting to.
The next one.
Next one.
is the quality of the concrete work not as contracted? Did they not meet the specs in the contract?
It's the aesthetic, it's just.
No, I'm literally asking, like, is that a contractual failure that we need to follow up with the,
It is not, Mayor. It
Okay.
was unfinished concrete. They finished it. Now, typically in those situations, we would cover that with a foam liner. That's just so
I
people
see
would
what you're
see
saying.
that. In this case, it did not get that treatment. So
Okay.
you're seeing that finished, but I guess the unfinished look of the concrete.
the prior bridge, though, was like,
The prior bridge was exposed aggregate. It wasn't that smooth.
so it had more
It
of a
was-
texture
yeah,
and more
it
of
had
a-
texture.
Okay. Yeah, I've got all the pictures right here, so. thanks.
Exposed aggregate concrete, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Kim?
The old bridge was lovely and quaint, and I think it's more because of its size than the design details. So, I'm interested in having this conversation, but I don't know that we can make such a large bridge look
Feel
as
smaller.
lovely and quaint as the old
Right.
bridge.
Other than having planter boxes that then have ivy growing over the side. Yes,
But the liner is attractive. The bridge
The
looks
liner
really
might-
great on the outside, which is,
Right.
most people can't see.
right.
Just be able to match it on the inside would make sort of a design sense. That liner has become part of the Highland Park look. It shows up in some of our other bridges. And so for that to now be on this bridge, it feels like a design inconsistency
Uh-huh.
in a city that pays a lot of attention to design consistency and aesthetics.
So Ron, where is this liner elsewhere? Is it Clavey or is it at,
Well, I think that we have not decided on this at the time. I think it was something that would be similar to what's on the outside of the bridge we would do on the inside. And I feel compelled in saying, just to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as staff goes, staff did recommend a liner for that side. Sorba's original design included a form liner for that design. But as we went through the historical preservation process, that was narrowed back, or that was scaled back to say, we want elements of the existing bridge, and that's why then Sorba was directed to design the bridge without that form liner. But
Gotcha.
our recommendation was, like we do for the majority of our bridges, is to put a decorative feature on there to make it look as aesthetically pleasing as possible.
right, so this is a $60,000 question basically that this group has to be discussing, right?
So there isn't another bridge where we have come back after the fact and put a form liner on. So this
Right.
would be kind of new territory for us,
I get that.
but it's possible. So based on preliminary estimates, that's where we got the 60,000, from. So if there was an interest in doing it, we would formalize, get some formal cost estimates in terms of a form liner that would be placed on that bridge to give it a decorative element on the street side to mirror what is also on the outside. And then we would come back to you with what that looks like, how it would be affixed, what the maintenance would be, things like that.
And Gita, would that go through another public process on what it's gonna look like with the form liner on the inside?
Yeah, so again, they got to, on a name-to-name basis with every single resident there as part of this process. And so if there was support from the council to move forward, I think we definitely would go back to the neighborhood, let them know we had this committee, the whole discussion, there was an interest in whatever you determine, and then to identify what the next steps are. I don't know, and it's certainly a policy question, I don't think we would need to go back to HPC, but certainly just know that it went through that process. I did share the policy conversation that we're having today with the chair of the HPC, who is not in the position at the time, but just let him know that we're having this conversation. So we would report back to the full HPC, but I don't think we need to present to them.
So I'm gonna reiterate my question though. How many other bridges in this town currently have that form liner as part of their inside?
Most of them, I believe.
Well, I think the newer ones, I mean, Park Avenue is getting a form
So
liner.
that was,
Mhm.
okay, so is it
Clavey.
part, okay, so
Clavey.
that's what I asked, was Clavey.
And that's what I'm referring to, it's a kind of the new template.
A standard.
A standard that is affecting our new bridges, and why doesn't this bridge have that?
Are
Well, I
those
think we
bridges
answered
under
why it doesn't
historic
have it.
preservation though?
Well, this wasn't either. So they
Um,
weighed in, but then it
But
was.
they, why were
deemed-
why are the other ones not reviewed by historic preservation?
They weren't found to
Because
be historically
They're not
significant by the
historically
state of
significant.
The
Illinois.
original
That's-
bridge was.
Not
Not
everything's
ours
historic.
significant.
Not
So,
everything's
okay, so just
This
to
one
boil
was.
down, because we seem to be kind of whirling here. The question is, do you want to spend the money on this form liner? Is it, a standard that we want to have for every bridge going forward? I mean, that's pretty much the question. Then we can get back to the painting of the metal.
Yeah, I'm personally less concerned with the painting of the metal, it's just it's discordant that you have, the metal too
But
high.
I understand that, and
and
I
I-
guess the question would be, what would the cost be then to replace that fencing? And I don't know that that fencing can be replaced based on the standards that are provided under whatever we've
I don't know
agreed
if
to
we
with
could
IDOT.
cut it down and,
We have
It
not.
sounds like that's an IDOT standard that, right? Or
I
not?
believe so. I mean, we can certainly
Yes.
explore that. We have not, we've explored the painting, we've explored the form liner, we have not explored changing out that rail. I mean, I would think that if we were gonna take that route, we would probably change all of it and not just cut it, because you're gonna have
A raw
the
edge
next
that's-
aesthetic
yeah.
problem, so I think we'd
Right.
probably explore a different type of railing for that, I suppose.
But is this, am I capturing what you guys are saying? You want a form liner inside the bridge? Is that, you don't care?
I'm not saying that I'm not sure that the form liner will actually work. I mean, literally, technically work, but, and I do want to say for the record that, it's in the minutes, it's been stated so many times that, Public Works was, just following the desires of
HPC.
HPC,
Right.
to have it smooth like the original bridge. For the record, the original bridge wasn't smooth. It was
Right.
not smooth. It was a
It was
different
composite.
finish.
Yeah.
It was a different finish. So that didn't happen, that didn't align for me. But as far as the form liner is concerned, I have some comments about it, but I wanted to know if they wanted to present on it.
Do you have more to say, or are we okay with where we are at the moment?
I'm okay with, again, we're here to
answer
get
questions.
your feedback.
Yeah.
You want it, what do you
I
want?
would just say, I just wanted to make one more point. So it was HBC here locally, and then also the state historical.
State Historic Preservation Office.
So the
Right.
state's historical preservation
Office.
office also weighed in on this, so we also went there. So I think once the push came from residents or the public that says, hey, this is historic, we went through that process and all the way to the state level, and this is the direction from the state as well.
Wow.
And that's what they approved for the grant funding.
And in terms of the tree question, because I see you have the slide up, do you guys want to talk about that briefly?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, 38 trees had to be removed, 34 were in the ravine there. They were in conflict with the improvement, and also in ravines, most people know this, I don't know if you do, but a lot of people know that, less trees, you want to limit the canopy
Right.
tree cover in the ravine because you want to put plants that are deep-rooted and grow.
Right.
We have trouble in ravines now where there's a lot of tree cover, the plants get too much shade and then they don't thrive.
And
And
then
then you end up with
erosion
erosion
issues.
problems.
Right.
People will suffer from those things.
Right.
So that's one reason, trees were removed, in addition to just being in the way.
So
And
this
then
was
we
more
put-
of a steep slope maintenance approach to this
Absolutely.
ravine?
Absolutely,
Gotcha.
and you'll notice there's a lot of riprap down here, Mayor. There's also, I mean, the bridge drains and functions great at this point, given what's been put in to assist with that. But that riprap prevents you also from planting more trees. And to Manny's point, we do see that in our, naturally occur, and then you kind of get like a muddy bottom.
Right.
And as soon as you get the heavy rains, you start to have those erosion problems.
And is the riprap part of the stability
Yes, Mayor.
down there? Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
just
stability
to-
and erosion,
right.
yes.
I thought that, and I know
I see.
Andres wants to, I thought that it would be really helpful to talk to a landscape architect about how you could both stabilize the slope and repopulate the ravine, because part of the problem, part of the issue of the look of the bridge is the whole context of the bridge.
Right.
It's not just the bridge.
Right.
It's the fact that the ravine was decimated. And you know, maybe there's a way to start by, you know, growing the lower, you know, plant life and then adding trees. I went to look over the weekend. Somebody's gonna have to point out the 17 new trees. I couldn't find any that looked like they had survived. It still looks empty. So somebody please show them to me. But I think a landscape architect could, you know, help us figure out just what I said, that how to stabilize it while repopulating and improving the look of the bridge by improving the context of it.
So I'm going to challenge you on that, because we have a forestry department that specializes in steep slope management. And I appreciate landscape architects and what they bring to the conversation, but I would also hazard that the professionals who work in forestry within ravines would probably also have that expertise to be able to speak to what are appropriate trees and appropriate growth, undergrowth, and so forth. I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the aesthetics, but I don't want to undercut the professionals who work in forestry for the city. Andres, you've had your hand up. Tony has his hand up. Have you got your? Okay.
Well, I would make a distinction, without knowing the full capability of your office, between something functionally accurate and correct and scientific,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have that in spades, and an aesthetic feel
Mm-hmm.
for what is possible in a way to make something happen. So whether we need a landscape architect or not, I don't know. But to me, it's just so barren right now, and I would love to hear of a plan, just how to populate it with some more green. I mean, we're so proud of our ravines, we're so proud of our bridges, it's part of the Highland Park experience. This is an unattractive bridge, and the inside walls, on that chain link fence, and the lack of greenery. I think we sort of, we have to recover something that is part of our heritage.
So, you mentioned, Yumi, that the ravine was decimated, but I think, again, if we talk to forestry, they would disagree with you to use the word decimated. It sounds like it was.
They had to, they had to excavate and. Yeah.
But they also then have been building back and doing what's considered maintenance, it sounds like, we need to give this a little bit more time, perhaps, for stuff to take root, for things to start to grow higher. One question that you raised about the internal wrapping, is it technically feasible to add this feature back into the bridge at this point? Can we add, it looks like the answer is yes. So why are you saying, again, I'm deferring to those who do this professionally and who are public work experts.
I called the company that was listed as the material, and well, I mean, I have some information about that, so.
Well, I would really urge us to allow the professionals in the city to take care of those decisions, to be honest with you.
Sure, but
versus-
it was good, because I had a question, which is, one of the questions is, I mean, first of all, the what is it called again? It's called custom rock or something? It's a form liner. I took the name off of the drawing you sent us, and, because I was curious how it would attach to dry concrete, hard concrete, because the form liner is usually
added when
with
things are still curing.
wet concrete, I mean, it's just logical. And it would have to be sort of anchored to, they said it, when I called the company, they said it is, I mean, for wet concrete, you would have to anchor it somehow to the existing bridge. And so then that question for me poses the other question separately from what, the technicality of that, but is that if you're applying another layer to an existing bridge, right, then you have a joint. You create a joint between the existing bridge and whatever layer is applied to it.
Right.
Right? So then you have to cap it, because you don't want water to get between the two layers, right? And I assume you'd have to flash it. I mean, you'd have to cap it somehow, or put coping on the
Something to
bridge,
stop the
something,
inflow of water between the seams.
because that would destroy whatever
Right.
you added to it.
Right.
So that's my question, how would you do that?
And so it's potentially no more expensive than 60,000. City manager wants to say something. You've been patiently waiting. I see a hand up over here as well. So, okay,
Just a question.
go ahead.
So Mayor, the policy question that we're seeking from the council is, do you want us to take that next step and explore a form liner to create an aesthetic element to cover the street side of the bridge? That's really the policy question.
Right.
So I would just urge the council, let's not get
The
into
weeds.
how it's gonna be, you
That's
know,
fine.
how many inspections it needs or anything
Right.
of that detail. So if we
Right.
could just kind of stay policy, if you
Yeah.
want us to explore that.
And
If
that
the
would
answer is-
provide the cost. the full
Right, we'll
cost.
get it has to go out to bid, we will get cost
Right.
estimates, we'll have all that information. The other thing I just wanted to say is there was a landscape plan that was prepared by a consultant. We have 4 foresters on staff that reviewed that.
Thanks.
Our forestry staff did an inspection to ensure that those 17 trees that were planted in accordance with the plan were actually done. So there's different layers to make sure, we don't just let the contractor go off and then just take their word on it.
Mhm.
So that was a check and balance to make sure that the landscape plan had been met and approved and signed, and it was signed off by our forestry staff.
Great.
And our director of public works is also a forester himself, so.
Well done.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this, because it was a federal funded or through the state also did an inspection. So
Right.
they also come back through to audit that inspection process to
Make
make sure
sure.
that the things we're paying for, or
Right.
that they're paying for ultimately,
Right.
have been done.
It was there, yeah. I'm gonna ask you to wait because others have things they'd like to share, Tony.
Thanks. I just want to echo what we've been talking about regarding the ravines. I grew up on Hawthorne Lane next to a ravine. My mother still lives there. I have a lot of friends who live in the houses on branches of that ravine. My brother lives on the ravine that has a new bridge over it on Forest. The city of Highland Park has a ravine rehabilitation program that's ongoing, that's very well informed, that includes landscaping issues and replacement issues with a long-term goal of sustaining the ravines, minimizing and rehabilitating the erosion that has occurred. That work doesn't happen in a given ravine in a year or two. I can tell you that the ravine, the bridge on Forest Avenue, just north of Ravine and Forest, was replaced several years ago. A lot of the work in replacing a bridge over a ravine of that depth had a lot of heavy equipment, and the plants in the ravine were pretty well removed or destroyed in the construction process. Some trees were planted, underbrush, lower plants were planted that are consistent with what we are doing to rehabilitate ravines, to avoid the deep cut at the bottom, to preserve a more gentle slope. I've seen what happens when trees are, when there's an overpopulation of large trees in a ravine. You wind up with very steep slopes, which is not good for the properties, the homeowners on either side as well. So I would not be in favor of altering the city's approach to managing the ravines in this case or any other case. It's been successful, and I'd like to let it have the time to do what it's doing.
Thank you. Annette?
Well, I had a couple just quick questions, but Tony, to your point, I also live on a ravine, and I walk through it literally every day, as well as having hunted a cat there twice on my hands and knees. And the city has really done an amazing job in terms of building it up and maintaining even. I'm shocked that it's even under control at all.
It's a line item in our capital improvement plan.
But it
It's
works.
part of our stormwater
Yeah.
management and part
It
of our
works.
forestry program, so, yeah.
Okay. So the one question I did have is I was a little confused because I had thought there was also state money,
Yeah.
but are we saying there was federal money
No.
and
those are
state
mistakes.
review, or was that a mistake?
It's federally funded, administered by the state.
Right.
Okay, great,
Yeah,
okay.
So the state IDOT is the one
Was really
administrating. the-
IDOT
yeah.
gets federal money and then IDOT
Right.
distributes
Great.
the money.
Exactly.
Okay, so that helps. And then my last question was, you know, I really do love listening to the commissions and the advisory groups because I think that they take their particular portion very seriously. And if a mistake was made, like what you're saying, in terms of a type of texture, which I think you're right, I'm wondering if there isn't a way, almost like, you know, like when you're doing plaster, to add a little texture rather than doing
score
the
it.
lining.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that would be truer to what was there. I personally, I do walk there 2 or 3 days a week, and I think it's beautiful. Part of it is, I love the white, and I would really be opposed to painting. I'm just putting it out there right
It
now.
would just be the metal and not the concrete.
Yeah, I don't, but I think it kind of blends in a little bit. I would hate to call more attention to it with something black or brown that would really pop. So I'm definitely not in favor of painting it. I'm just wondering if there's a way even to speckle the inside to give it some texture, because I don't like the idea on a bridge of putting something on that might not take, or that, the same way as my idea with the plants was really bad, is because it will ruin the finish. This is something outdoors, hopefully for 50 years. And I don't want to take away from the integrity of it, especially if it meets all the specs and it was done right, which it's sounding like it is, and, you know, to a layperson's eye, it's beautiful and it looks like it does. Now, other people have different tastes. So I'm not arguing the point. I just, maybe that would be less of an intrusion. I don't know. So I just would ask about that.
Okay, Andres?
Just to type a loose end, I like the argument you made about, you know, the long-standing preservation of ravines. The reason we're proud of them, it's not only they're beautiful, but they've been really well maintained, and there's a lot of knowledge. So, you know, the encouragement to say give it some time is, you know, I would lean into trusting that. I mean, obviously it looks bare now. You know, part of it is being a communications thing, you know, about, hey, this takes time, we're aware, we got the best people on it, you know, and look, and even refer people, right? If you're wondering what a bridge looks like 3 years later, 4 years later,
Right.
that got decimated, let's just use that word for now, that look how it's restored, right? And this is the same methodology we're gonna use for this bridge. So I'm good to not have to worry about that in terms of, in this conversation. And so, you know, I made my point earlier about the aesthetic, so it does have implication, whatever we decide here, you know, it's a precedent, right? It's like, the new bridges have this look, and it's really attractive. I mean, at Clavey and a park, the outside of this very bridge, you know, and to me, it looks like unfinished business that we, not that this is a history, because it was careful consideration, but as time goes on, it just looks like a careless oversight. Why does this bridge look so bare? And why doesn't it reflect the aesthetics of Highland Park?
Thank you. Ron wanted to talk first.
Well, I was just gonna speak to it very quickly, is the ravine itself prior to this construction. So, I mean, the ravine was not functioning right. I'll say there was a lot of erosion. We have a ton of pictures. I mean, the bridge was old, but the bridge supports were eroding because of the erosion around it. So,
Wow.
yes, you had these trees that had grown up naturally over the last, 100 years or 50 years, but it also was a ravine that was not functioning the way it should. And so now what we have, looking a little bit more bare, admittedly, with the riprap and stuff like that, but you have a ravine that drains and functions properly, and eliminates that erosion problem. So
You
there's a
don't have
little-
the dissupport of the bridge.
Yeah, there's a little bit of give and take, and
Yeah.
things will certainly naturally come back. It is pretty new, but just wanted to point out that ravine was not in good shape prior to this construction.
Great, thank you for that. Yumi?
You know, to that point, I'm not really aware of how plants can push, you know, large chunks of, you know, stone out of the way to grow. I really think it's gonna be very, very difficult to regrow it. I do feel that a different approach, I guess I have to ask, because my overarching reason, as I said to my colleague, Councilmember Tapia, overarching issue for me was learning from what we've done and not repeating it, you know, in the future. I would like to see that ravine repopulated, but in general, I hope that we learn from this and even all the different pieces, the processes of how the inside didn't get a pattern, you know, and just, you know, why we use certain funding sources, you know, all the time. Maybe we don't use it for smaller projects, just reasonable things to discuss. And I would like to ask if, you know, the price that you quoted for the form liner, did that include what I was talking about? Because I don't think it did include, putting a cap. I think it was just.
Just the form liner
just the
without
form
the
liner.
protection from,
Right?
the
I
rain.
mean, that
So-
60,000 didn't include that.
Well,
Uh,
We certainly would never install a.
Yeah.
they
Let me
wouldn't do
respond.
they wouldn't do it halfway.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's,
I'll just, let me finish what I
Mhm.
was going to say, that in any event, it was my own feeling that maybe the whole thing would get more expensive than 60,000. I think that, one possibility is sandblasting it, testing
to
out.
kind of break it up.
To,
In
just
terms of the
change,
smoothness.
change the surface by sandblasting it. Maybe a less expensive, and less involved, process, because it is, it's hard to see, at least for me, it's hard to see how adding, that masonry after the fact
So-
can be done well, unless we put more money into it, which I'm not sure any of us, including me, wants to do.
So I am going to challenge you again,
Okay.
because in summary of what you were saying in terms of lessons learned, the lesson was, this is a historic bridge. What is the Historic Preservation Commission's view of the aesthetics moving forward? And I think that was appropriate, right? We referred to that group that specializes in assessing these pieces throughout our community and listened to what they had to say. We may disagree, but that was their assessment. In terms of funding, I am always going to say to you, if there is an opportunity for someone else to provide major funding for an infrastructure program, specifically the State Department of Transportation, for enormously expensive projects, I'm not gonna defer to, I think we can pick up the bill for what was it, 80% at the state? That's huge. And so to say, we don't really agree with them, we wanted to stay one lane, but I understand what you're saying, and you're welcome to your opinion. But as somebody who feels very responsible about the taxpayers' money,
I
I'm
do
gonna
too.
say thank you, I know you do. I'm gonna say thank you to the state, and we'll figure out how we can address whatever aesthetic differences we have.
For the sake of council knowing that the IDOT will only build 2-lane bridges, that's all they build.
Understood,
And so,
right, and
yeah.
we've talked about that in
Yeah.
public hearings previously. Lastly, in terms of ravine maintenance, again, I'm gonna urge anybody who's curious about what we do in terms of the decisions specific to stormwater management and ravine maintenance, go online. We have an amazing set of pages on the city website that gets into the details of how ravines are maintained by Public Works. So I don't think there are, at least in my opinion, a lot of lessons to be learned. I think we've followed our protocol that we usually do. I understand that the aesthetics are not necessarily what people are in agreement with. But I'm not gonna say we're gonna throw everyone under the bus because we disagree with what it looks like when we're being responsible with funding. We're following our protocol in terms of commissions, and we're doing what I think is, best practices in terms of ravine maintenance. Marissa, you've patiently been waiting. Tony has something to say. I think Andres has more to say, and Annette is done. Okay, Marissa?
I was just gonna say, listening to this presentation, it sounds like everything was done as it should have been, and I would not say spend extra money to make changes at this point. I think it looks nice to me from my eyes and my view, and then to start it up again and then disturb the homeowners nearby for a project that's already completed and looks nice to me. So that's all I was gonna say.
Thank you. Tony?
I agree with that. I was gonna say other things, but I think that's it.
Okay. Andres? You're good? Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with that.
You agree with that? Okay. Yes.
Can I ask,
Sure.
Since it was pushed to an agenda item,
Yeah.
we're discussing it,
We are?
I'm not looking to spend significant amount of money
Okay.
unless it was a treatment that was, not unless, I don't see it as a reasonable solution, a good solution to spend a ton of money to recover the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
in theory, you could, like I said, sandblast it, but, which would not add anything to the bridge. But I guess I wanted to make my point that I didn't bring this as an agenda item. I
Right.
just supported having a discussion about it, and I don't support spending a lot of money on a fix that I don't think would be a good one.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks. Kim?
Yeah, I don't support spending a lot of money on a fix that I agree may not work as we think it will. But I also want to push back a little bit on the process. I think that the Historic Preservation Commission has a lot of expertise in evaluating older homes and doing certain things, figuring out within our standards whether things are historic. But I don't think they have expertise on bridges. And bridges are different.
They're more house-oriented than bridge-oriented.
Well, bridges in full disclosure, I took a physics course specifically on bridges in college. I was a physics minor on an art history major. So bridges are a whole different animal. And the way that the concrete is gonna look when you show it on a piece of paper is different than the way the concrete looks when you have a whole bridge, which is just, a lot bigger than the previous bridge. And I think that having perhaps the engineers flag that to the city manager to say, HBC didn't want to do this, but we disagree. And I know I've spoken to Gita about that, and I think that it will move forward in that way. But
Right.
I just want to make sure, for the record, that is how we do it going forward, that the HBC not necessarily be involved in bridge design, that we defer to the engineers on that, but that we bring in whoever needs to be brought in to make sure that it looks up to our standards.
I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking of
It
the
is.
pedestrian bridge over Cary Avenue, the HBC was critical in that
Right.
conversation. So,
It's
Yes.
a component.
I was just gonna say, I am and was the liaison to the HPC during this process. What they were asked to weigh in on was very limited, and they took that limitation very seriously, which had more to do with the shape of the bridge. They had nothing to do with the engineering, and they entirely did defer to staff. They asked that to the degree it was possible within engineering, that the form or shape of the bridge, as much as possible, reflect the bridge, the one-lane bridge that was existing visually. There was really no discussion about the surface. The surface did appear in photographs to be a smooth cement surface, but the texture of the bridge wasn't discussed at all. There was an effort to try to get the form of the visual part of the bridge above ground to look, to the extent it was doable from an engineering standpoint, to reflect the shape of the previous bridge.
great, thank you. All right, well, yes?
Yeah, I know, the direction is clear, but just for the record, I think when we say, this liner thing may not work, or it doesn't look like it's gonna work, I think it's premature for us to declare whether it's gonna work or not. I thought this conversation was whether there'd just be enough energy to have staff look at what it would be, what it would cost, what would it look like, and then we make a decision. But for us to prejudge and say, well, it's not gonna work because of this, that, it's like, well, they just recommended something they think will work. Do they have the go-ahead to just say, well, this is the actual cost, this is the actual look, here are the parameters? So a little bit.
You're wondering if we can get the data. My understanding, though, is this group is not interested in spending tens of thousands of dollars on that. Do we have baskets, plant baskets on other bridges, or is that not a thing?
I don't believe so.
I mean, the maintenance is probably a fiasco, too. Okay. I think we've kind of come to some decent consensus, and let's just hope a lot of moss grows fast. Call it a day. While we're hanging around and have some time, can we go into closed session, if that's okay? Thank you all for all of this, and thanks for bringing this to us, Andres, and thank you for a great bridge. Appreciate it. I'm going to seek a motion to go into close for purposes of litigation and personnel.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk call the?
Do you want the
We need to
section,
cite,
2C1 and 2C11.
okay,
what he said?
okay,
So moved.
okay. So if we could call that vote to go into close.
Section numbers.
Councilmember Brockman,
Present?
No, aye.
Councilmember Ross,
Aye.
Councilmember Tapia,
Aye.
Councilmember Littleworth,
Aye.
Councilmember Stone,
Aye.
Councilmember Blumer,
Aye.
Mayor Rivers.
Aye, thank you.